Here's an overview of this chapter. For Chapter 5, we will learn how to distinguish the 4 zones of interpersonal distance. We will also learn to describe the impact of expectancy violations on interpersonal attraction. And finally, we will explore how proximity may lead to perceptions of similarity.
Proxemics refers to the use of personal space and interpersonal distance. Every person acquires his or her understanding of what personal space is based upon their own culture. Thus, each culture has its own near-universal understanding of a distance that is considered good manners. Misunderstandings can happen when a person interacts with people who do not share a similar perspective. In other words, differences in how people understand to be appropriate proxemic distances can lead to misunderstandings. So, how do we conceptualize interpersonal distance? Edward T. Hall describes 4 different classifications of approximate interaction distances. Each category includes the amount of space between 2 people and that has implications for the nature of the relationship between 2 people interacting within those spaces.
Let's take a look at the intimate zone. The intimate zone is the closest of Hall's interpersonal distances, ranging from 0 inches of actual touch to 18 inches. Here, only our closest interpersonal relationships are allowed to enter. In this zone, we are highly aware of every aspect of the other interactant. Kinesthetic awareness allows each person to feel one another's senses. Thus, we only let our most trusted individuals into our intimate zone. When occupied by someone else than one's most trusted interpersonal partners, the closeness would be overwhelming. The second zone of interpersonal distance is the personal or casual zone. We reserve the personal or casual zone for close friends and family members. This zone ranges from 18 inches to about 4 feet. We also tend to have a degree of trust with individuals in this zone. Relative to our intimate zone, we welcome many individuals to enter our personal/casual zone. In other words, these are people we feel comfortable with. It is only because we have a degree of trust that we allow someone to get so physically close to us. The presence of the other is not as overwhelming as the intimate zone. The personal/casual zone looks like a forward-facing egg-shaped bubble. The zone is described as an egg-shaped bubble surrounding each person, as our sense receptors typically face forward.
The social/consultative zone is the third zone. It allows us to interact with others in a variety of professional or acquaintance-based contexts. This zone ranges from 4 feet to 8 feet. Interactions that occur in the zone include workplace conversations, interactions with members of an extended social circle in a public setting, and getting things accomplished at one's place of business. The distance of 4 feet reflects the cultural concept of keeping someone at arm's length. As any individual cannot suddenly move to strike or attack, this is an important evolutionary adaptation. The fourth zone is the public zone. It is where we are most comfortable keeping unknown others with no professional obligations, ranging anywhere above 8 feet to infinity. In public, one is relatively comfortable with a stranger staying beyond 8 feet away. Based upon our pre-existing relationship with them, we only allow certain people into certain zones. For example, you might be very comfortable allowing your romantic partner to give you a quick embrace but might be very unwilling to shake hands with an unknown other on the street. How do we determine the appropriate proxemics distance in any given situation? The factors that would influence the proxemic zone is one's relationship type, and your evaluation of your relationship with another person. For example, a person interacting with you more closely than expected would cause you to subconsciously reevaluate your relationship, if you already have a positive attitude towards someone. Therefore, proxemics violations and perceptions are a driver of the perceptions that we have about a variety of people in our personal lives. Cultural norms determine personal space. In Western cultures, residents prefer relatively larger proxemic distances between interaction partners. For instance, a Westerner in some African countries may be surprised to find that people stand in closely packed queues. In turn, one may experience proxemic violation when in any scenario one finds a challenge to his or her own notion of acceptable interpersonal distance. The violation will likely lead to a physical and evaluative response of one's interaction partner. A fight or flight response is a natural outcome of a personal space violation. From an evolutionary perspective, if someone gets closer than they ought to be, then we immediately determine an appropriate response. In order to manage the situation, our minds and our bodies immediately jump into action. Our bodies prepare ourselves by the biological responses like skin conductance or respiration rate or even heart rate. While effects are not immediately apparent, physiological arousal may cause feeling stressed or anxious. The responses to proxemics violations influence the ways we interact with others. Nevertheless, said feelings and reactions will be immediately noticeable only to the person who is feeling physiologically aroused.
Proxemic violations influence perceptions. We become physiologically aroused, and then try to make sense of that feeling when an individual behaves in a manner other than what we expect. The expectations we have about normal social distances are based upon our known idiosyncrasies or individual patterns of behavior of our partner. But to where does violation lead us? Violations of the norms and expectations would cause people to think about the situation, and to reevaluate their relationship. The process of reevaluating a relationship may also create additional feelings of closeness. Several factors influence perceptions. We will have an overview on this slide and then explore additional details on the next slide. First, there is deviation. Deviation is the magnitude of the difference from what is expected. Second, the violator's ability to offer interpersonal rewards or punishment is another factor. And third, threat threshold is the reactance of the violated person to the proxemic infringement.
Let us look at the factors a little closer now. For deviation, the amount of difference from what is expected will likely impact the overall physiological arousal of the person whose space is threatened. A strong response reaction is likely created in the person being violated upon a huge violation of one's expected personal space. Next, valence is the ability of the violator to offer rewards or punishment. One must think of these concepts in terms of what that person can make an individual feel. For threat threshold, some individuals get triggered easily, and even the slightest proxemic violation is likely to gain their notice. However, some other individuals' tolerance is quite high or their likelihood of noticing is quite low. In short, we constantly observe and experience proxemic threats, as people move through one another's personal space. When a threat occurs, we judge about our interaction partners based on the magnitude of the threat, our attitude towards the violator, and our own individual and cultural experiences. Generally, people behave according to shared cultural norms and expectations about personal space.
In general, people are motivated to interact with people who are similar to themselves. The perception of similarity is one of the primary reasons that an individual might select to have a relationship with another person. This perception is based upon nonverbal characteristics. That includes observable characteristics, such as sharing the same style of dress or having similar racial backgrounds as one another. Unobservable characteristics include similar cultural experiences or shared religious identities. A new term here is homophily, which refers to the liking that occurs when we interact with similar others. We also find comfort with perceived similarity. Similarity helps to reduce uncertainty about how that person will act in a variety of situations. It helps you to assume that they would likely behave in similar ways to you in similar situations. It also helps us affirm many of our related life choices and preferences. Difference refers to the engaging to a unique other person. Indeed, we are also motivated to interact with people who are different from us. However, only after determining some base level of similarity, are individuals likely to be motivated to engage a different person. Complementarity refers to the degree to which individuals see one another as complementing the values, beliefs, behaviors, or aspirations of each other. It is seen when an individual exhibiting traits, gifts or behaviors that the other sees as lacking. In terms of the use of nonverbal codes, difference is not always noticeable. Difference does not function as a specific nonverbal code. However, there are many characteristics of nonverbal communication to determine similarity and difference. For example, an individual might use attributes of physical appearance to guess at the personality, socio-demographic characteristics, and to determine markers of similarity and/or difference. Clothing is another nonverbal cue that might hint at the other person's skills, interests, or behaviors.
And finally, proximity is one of the reasons that people may be more motivated to interact with one another. Proximity is related to individuals' physical distances from one another. In some ways, we are more attracted to people with whom we share the same physical space. Another similar concept is called mere exposure effect. This situation emerges when an individual is more likely to be attracted to things that he or she sees frequently, relative to those things that are rarely or never seen. Communication reduces uncertainty. It is one of the best ways to figure out the attitudes, values, and beliefs of those that surround us. Uncertainty reduction explains why we are more interested in interacting with unknown others. We will try to fit uncertainty into our schemata. What that means is that humans quickly characterize individuals who do not behave in a typical or expected manner as different. We evaluate one another on the basis of whether they fit into specific groupings or schemata, and re-evaluate our own identity based upon the schemata where we place ourselves. Therefore, our identity is a strong predictor of our nonverbal and verbal communication behaviors, and the ways we see ourselves influence our interaction with others. In summary, how we engage in personal space and interpersonal distance is based on culture and our relationship with others. However, as relationships are complicated, so are the factors that influence our use of space. In this chapter, we considered similarity and difference as factors that affect interpersonal distance. Ultimately, it is a constantly changing experience.